Welcome to the ICU podcast, where we explore the vestibular experience through conversations between patients and the health professionals who care for them.
During this podcast, we invite patients to share their stories and healthcare professionals to ask questions so they are equipped to better care for and truly see the invisible challenges faced by their patients. I'm Kimberly Warner.
And I'm Cynthia Ryan, and we are your hosts on this journey of discovery.
Oh my gosh, I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. We are going to talk about devices while we are staring at screens as I speak. And we can't live without them, but we sometimes feel like we can't live with them either, especially if you are like me, living with a vestibular disorder. When I was in the first 2 years of my vestibular disorder, I remember longing to turn back the clock to the 1800s. Televisions, computer screens, even my smartphone sent my nervous system into a tailspin. So it took me years to return to modern communication. I was completely isolated. And because I wasn't connecting digitally during that time, I had no idea others were experiencing the same problem as me. When we are symptomatic, trying to scroll through an article on the phone or watch a movie on a tablet can be literal torture. Attending a Zoom meeting with multiple people talking and moving can be unbearable. Even just like texting back and forth with a friend can be dizzying. But we also know that staying connected is an important part of our recovery. And this is often through virtual mediums. So it is important to use every tool available to improve our ability to function while using a digital device. Even small changes that we'll talk about today can have a big impact. So we're going to take some time to explore these challenges today and discuss a multitude of ways to make our digital companions more user-friendly, since we can't turn back the clock.
Yes, indeed. We really, I get these messages sometimes on my phone that my usage has been up since last week or down since last week. So even our digital devices are reminding us to be careful about how much time we're spending on them. So I want to start by welcoming Dr. Cheryl Berger-Israeloff, who has more than 20 years experience practicing optometry and focuses her practice on a subspecialty called neurovisual optometry, which deals with the diagnosis and treatment of vision problems commonly found in the brain-injured population. We'll talk more about that as we get into this. Dr. Cheryl is a pioneer in the optometric treatment of conditions that caused blurred vision, motion sickness, and headaches. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. She graduated from Cornell University and SUNY College of Optometry. Welcome, Dr. Cheryl.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Cheryl. And for our patient guest today, we have Alexandra Biss. And this is our first time we've had Alexandra with us. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of your story. Alexandra, just as a little background, has had dizzy symptoms since she was in her teens, but she officially started her vestibular journey during the start of the COVID pandemic in 2020, when she completely lost her balance and was unable to walk without support. She was ultimately diagnosed with chronic vestibular migraine that stripped her of her independence and stability. And after multiple doctor visits, she finally met a neurologist who was a vestibular specialist. While her symptoms are still prominent through medication and vestibular therapy, she has begun getting back on track. So she currently works as an underwriting analyst at an insurance firm in Canada and has started running, which is now a central passion of hers. And maybe we'll find out if that's even a little bit of a therapy for her. On the days she was bedbound, never once did she think she would be able to take part in any sport again. So her newly found love for running has allowed her to regain stability and confidence. She has completed 2 half marathons, both raising money for VITA, and is currently preparing for her first full marathon this coming May. Welcome, Alexandra. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So impressive. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, so we just heard a little bit about your background. Sounds like you've been living with dizziness for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit in sort of a summarized version of your vestibular journey?
Of course, yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head in the overarching journey. But yeah, it was something that I always felt that I had growing up, and it wasn't a sense of nausea. It was just feeling a little bit unsteady as I grew up. If I would be taking part in any sport, I come from a very sporty family, and I did just have that inner sense of I could fall over. I'm near falling over. And then at the start of the COVID pandemic, when we were all resorted to using screens even more just to keep up with family and friends. I'm from the UK. The pandemic I was here when the pandemic started in Canada, and so I had to travel back. And yeah, it happened pretty much overnight. I woke up and I was so dizzy, and I felt like I was almost drunk walking home. That was the feeling that I was experiencing. Couldn't see. I was so dizzy. I was so nauseous. Couldn't keep any food down. So I, in turn, lost a ton of weight. I looked incredibly unhealthy. Even though I was starving, I couldn't keep any food down because I did just have this dizzy aura 24/7. There was never a break when I would have these really, really bad episodes. And because it's not a common thing, especially in people my age, I was only 20 when this really started for me. So there really wasn't a direction that I saw was clear, or a path that I saw was clear. I went to my general practitioner. She's like, "Oh, have you got a headache? Maybe just lie down." And I thought, no, it's not a headache. It's something else. I don't know what this is. I can't quite put my finger on it. And had I not had private healthcare with my dad's employment, I probably wouldn't have even been able to connect with this neurologist. He's so busy. He's doing clinical trials all the time at Imperial College in London. And had I not been connected with him after multiple visits to, I had tests for my hearing, I had tests for all sorts of things, and they just couldn't put a nail on the head. And yeah, I met my neurologist, and he diagnosed me with it, and we slowly went up in increments with my medication. And it was overnight again. One day I woke up and I'm like, oh, maybe I can. Oh, I'm fine. I can walk. I can go downstairs without my mum helping me. I can use the bathroom. So yeah, pretty much overnight the recovery as well. I still do have the odd episode every now and then, but I'm very much aware of when they're coming, and I know what triggers me. And it's convenient we're talking about screens, because again, I couldn't even escape the horrible cycle I was in, just lying down in bed. I couldn't watch TV because the screen's moving all around. There was no enjoyment in it. Even listening to music, I just thought, I'm not even enjoying this. Like any screen, looking at it, I couldn't. So the days felt very long. And so now, yeah, I do use a lot of tips and tricks to help me, but we can talk about that afterwards. So yeah, that's the very broad story.
I find it really interesting that it was the pandemic that triggered or brought this to a head with all the screens that everybody was using.
Yeah.
I find that
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
I think it was almost like, I think the world almost felt, at least I did, it was a massive reset. It made everyone come to a halt, no matter what field you're in, no matter what you were doing. It was, no, 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 you have to stop now. You can't do anything. You can't leave your house. You have to stop. And I'm very much in a belief that because we had to stop, then my body could finally go, I'm exhausted. This is really what's going on. And it all just came out. It was like almost a rash kind of thing. It just came out overnight. And I truly do believe it was the fact that we had the pandemic, had to stop, and then it all came out as if like, yeah, you know what, your body's exhausted because you've been feeling like this for a really long time. And this is now what this is now what we have to do because you're forced to rest.
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. Push, 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 and then
Yeah.
one thing triggers me to have to. Oh, let this is all caught up to me, and I've got to stop and
Exactly.
actually deal with it, and then it comes on all at
Exactly.
once.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
So when we're interacting with our screens, we're obviously interacting with our screens primarily with our eyes, our vision. So Dr. Cheryl, can you tell us what neurovisual optometry is so that we can kind of have a background for what we're going to talk about?
So I belong to the Neurovisual Medicine Institute, and we are a subset of optometry. We're actually working on our fellowship certifications now on the board for that. And what we focus on and how we were trained, not just brain injury, we're really trained to focus on the visual aspects of the dizzy patient. Whether your dizziness is from brain injury or just happened, um, that's our primary focus. My practice has kind of evolved from that, but that's still about 75% of what I do. The rest I deal with stroke patients and um, just double vision patients. So I've just kind of got known for, if you have double vision, go to her. But primarily what we do is we look at very fine tune the visual aspects of the dizzy patient. And our treatment approach is different. We use microprisms to help get the eyes in alignment to help alleviate the system. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but you're probably aware that so vision's our primary sense, and the eyes and the ears are very much connected. And balance and moving through space is these three systems. It's eyes, it's ears. You got that feedback loop, vestibular ocular reflex. Your eyes go the opposite way, up and down, side by side. And also your proprioception, right? So your input from all your muscles, your joints, how you hold your body. That's why it's great, Alexandra, that you're running. Wow, that is great because you're using those systems. We know that people who get out there and move their body do better. They do better. So what we look at is, if you think of that tripod, we look at that visual system very carefully. And there's signals that go back and forth between the vestibular system and the eye muscles through this vestibular ocular reflex, especially the vertical eye muscles. And we know that that's what they measure when they do OVAMs, right? They put electrodes by your vertical eye muscles. So we know that. That's why when someone gets acute dizziness and if they get BPPV, you get nystagmus, right? Because it's the eye muscles reacting to a problem with the vestibular system or brain. It can come from brain too. So that's what we look at, and we have a unique treatment approach.
So,
and you
Dr.
have to
Cheryl, oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's
I'm
okay.
curious. Maybe we can, and maybe this will come later, but I just want to ask you the question because I didn't have a diagnosis for years, and eventually ended up with a Malday debarkment
Right.
and diagnosis. And I ended up actually going to neurooptometrist in Chicago and thought it was going to be the holy grail for me. And she did work with prisms, and it didn't help for me. So I'm assuming that sometimes when there's the neurological mismatch, it's not necessarily going to be corrected by.
Well, it could be, but it's also, I don't know who you went to. Did you go to a neurovisual specialist or did you go to just a neurooptometrist? Because Prism just moves an image. That's all it does. There's no magic. It's physics. It moves an image. And a lot of people use Prism in different ways than how we use it. So there's different philosophies. So when someone, a dizzy patient, is looking for someone to really evaluate them, I think it's important that they look for a neurovisual medicine specialist, someone who is trained by the Neurovisual Medicine Institute. It's a separate training that we go through. So, yeah, and I think that's a key because you have to understand part of what I trained and learned, and I didn't learn this in school, I learned this in my postgraduate training, was how the vestibular system works. I know now about things that, a new patient comes to me or I'm speaking to another doctor and they're like, who's that crazy eye doctor that knows about, third window mobile defects and so
Yeah.
that's, I think, a crucial aspect to be able to evaluate what is wrong with someone. And sometimes, my worst day is when I say to someone, I can't help you. That's the worst. I can't make that better for you.
Mm.
But a lot of people we can. A lot of people.
Thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful. Um, so going back to screens, I'm really glad that we touched on that. But I want to come back to you, Alexandra. It sounds like you were in college when your visual and vestibular system and everything just started to go awry, and you were unable to look at screens at all. And that's probably a primary. I'm dating myself, but we weren't using iPads and stuff when I was in college. But so that must have been really extraordinarily challenging, both academically and socially. So
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit.
Yes, of course. You know, when you're 21, it's your screens, is your life. When you're in school, college, university, I was enrolled at the University of Toronto, and because it was the pandemic, I'd flown back to London, thank goodness, so that I wasn't living alone and I was with my parents. Um, and honestly, I think I got through it because of the room given to students during the pandemic and the new faces we were challenged with being a student online. And I had the time difference also. So my classes weren't at a normal time. You know, I had tutorials finishing at 1 a.m. sometimes because of the time difference. So I couldn't look at a screen. I couldn't read anything on a screen. And it was I would lie on the sofa, my eyes were closed, and my poor mum sitting next to me, you know, or my feet on her, and I had the class going, and I'd be talking to her saying, can you just type these out? That's how I would do it. And that took we get on very well. But if I didn't have my mum to do that for me, it wouldn't have been oh, okay, well, you can have this accommodation, because could I have even written a polite email to a professor saying, hey, I'm kind of dizzy. Can you just pass me? It's not, I didn't even know what was going on with me. So even asking my professors to give me some leeway, I couldn't have done that. So because because my thoughts were so intact, it was just all my symptoms that were a nightmare. I still managed to get my work done, and my poor mom, again, she was typing. She was like my scribe for months. But yeah, so through a prayer, I managed to do that. And on my phone, in my social life, it was non-existent, not only from the pandemic, but I couldn't keep up with anything. I missed so many crucial events that I couldn't attend to. Not that I lost friends, but I had friends thinking, oh, what, you're just dizzy. Like, what do you mean you can't come? What do you mean you have to flake? Because I woke up that day and I said, oh, sorry, I'm having an episode. I can't. You'll watch me walk. And it's the thing I remember was when I was walking, as you get older and you'll see on the street someone who's of old age and they kind of do walk with a bit of a hunch. I was walking with half of my body near the floor and when I could walk. And I didn't know why I was doing it. But now looking back, I'm thinking, oh, I just was ready to fall. I had to be near the floor because I knew I was such a fall risk. And so, yeah, social life was out the window. You just couldn't look. It was so just dizzying seeing the screen flow around you. But one thing that I very much now learn, and again, like talking about like my job, it is my screen's my life. I couldn't not work with screens. But I use the nightlight feature on all of my devices, and it's on 24/7. I'm labeled the grandma in my office because you'll come by my desk and the screen is like a warm yellow tone and everyone else is like bright blue. But that really, maybe it's a placebo effect, I don't know. But because it's not making my eyes squint, it does help. So even on days where I'm feeling like those words are moving around, because the blue light isn't like piercing my eye and hurting, I'm a big believer in everyone should have the night light on all the time.
Yeah.
So it sounds like when you were in your acute phase, you basically just didn't use screens. You couldn't even, deal with trying to figure out workarounds. At that time, you had to just not use the screen, and over time, you've figured out those workarounds. So, I want to get back to, I want to put a pin in talking about those tips and tricks, because I know that there are more than that one, the nightlight. But I want to start, Dr. Cheryl, by asking, what is it? Why do vestibular patients have such a hard time with digital devices and screens. What is
Yeah.
going on that um, that makes their eyes so sensitive? Well, I'm saying their eyes, but I'm guessing it's more than that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the first thing is to understand and realize that the vestibular patient, again, you think of this tripod of eyes, ears, proprioception. The vestibular patient is so shaky on that ears, right? They're using their eyes more than anyone else. So, number one, their visual system is exhausted all the time because it's working overdrive just to help them so they don't topple over, right? That's number one. Number two, sitting on a screen and anything doing all of this close up work is very unnatural for any human. We have not evolved. We're still, our evolution visually is still hunter gatherer. It is not sitting and keeping everything converged. So if you have even minor problems and you're not a vestibular patient, you have problems. Okay, so that's number two. Number three, when you scroll on a screen, the text is moving. When you read on just that paper, the text's not moving. You do these eye movements. Now you have an extra added eye movement. And then the smaller the screen, the more eye movements you have to do just to get to the next line, right? So you have increased eye movements. You have a very unnatural setting for a human. You have that we never get a break because, by the way, when people are not doing their work, they're looking at one of these, right? So you never get that break. It's exhausting. And then let's talk about the filters and the light and the blue. I don't think it's placebo effect. Blue wavelengths scatter more, right? Blue wavelengths scatter more. You get that sensation of that scattering, and that makes you feel sick too. So these are my computer glasses. I don't have them on now because they're not so attractive. But this is Blue Tech. These are my computer glasses. I have my own. Now you guys are so much clearer for me. Um, I have the Blue Tech, which is like embedded in the lens. It's the classic. They came out with an Ultra too. Mine are old. I have my own major binocular vision problem, so I have actually more than micro prism in here. I have a lot, and I also have the blue blocker anti-reflective. So this simulates on this screen exactly what Alexandra said, like that warm yellow, and I have it set perfectly for this focal point. And I always said, I really hope I don't get a vestibular disorder because I have major visual problems. I have it fixed, but if I did it, my eyes would be so exhausted all the time. I'd see double all the time. So that's the whole thing. That's why screens are so challenging for not one reason, for a multitude of reasons. A multitude of reasons.
I think you just answered a question for me too, because pursuing the eye solution for me in the early stages of my disorder, I also went to eye vision therapy. And after one day, and so let's just put into context, my eyes were exhausted because I'd already had a year and a half at that point of trying to compensate. One day of visual therapy, I went home and about an hour later, I developed my first brain zap. I'm sure you've heard people say what those are. And I thought I was having a stroke. I fell to the
Yeah.
floor and proceeded to have 6 months of probably 12 brain zaps a day. I never went back to vision therapy, but I'm sure, again, it was probably like just too much. Even if it was trying to, create a solution, is my understanding probably correct there?
Yeah, probably, yeah, over the edge. And it really depends on that person's visual status. But when your system is so exhausted, and like I said, because of the work and the jobs we have to do in the world we live in today, people need a tool you need a tool to help relieve those symptoms first. If you don't have that, and you just try to do exercises to do that, you can somebody can get totally thrown over the edge. Because your visual system, you're so exhausted anyway. And a lot of people, they're still doing a job, or they're still a student. They still have to live their life. It's
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
not an unusual scenario, Kim.
during Life for Balanced Live, when we were talking with Dr. Rachel Wellens, who's a neurologic physical therapist, she, in the context of vestibular rehabilitation therapy, used the term dosing. And I imagine it's similar here. You know, you have to dose the exercises so that you're not overdoing it. And that is also, you know, dose it, that could maybe also be applied to, you know, the amount of time we spend on the screen, or you know, and I think we'll get into this next, all the, you know, the tools we use. You're showing your, what you called computer glasses, what are often referred to as, you know, light sensitivity glasses, like the ones, or migraine glasses, like the ones that I'm wearing. These are from Axon, or also now known as Avalux. And there are a couple of companies that produce these glasses that have very specific wavelengths of light that
I'll
they
show
block.
you. I have that too. I don't have them for me. So that's a different, I don't know if you want an explanation on that now or not, but.
Well, let's go into, actually, I want to, we'll pick that up, because I want to hear, Alexandra, you're called grandma at your workplace. In fact, my friends call me grandma too, because of my schedule and all that. You're not alone. But tell me other adaptations that you've done other than the night mode on your computer screen.
There's the night mode is the big one, and I think knowing when to step away and take those little bio breaks that I've heard people term them as. It's not that you're not working hard, it's that if you've been staring at a screen for over 2 hours, you need a break, whether you feel it or you don't. And screens of it's not only just at work, but it's at every single part of our day. I was talking about this with my colleagues. You know, you wake up, phone. You go to the office, you're on your phone on the way into work. You look at screens all day long. You look on your phone on the way home from work. You sit down on the couch. Oh, you put the TV on. You don't realize how many screens you're looking at and the amount of time we're looking at them all day long. So I think that's been a big thing, learning when to just say, I need at least 15 minutes, no screen, at least 15 minutes. So yeah, that's a big component, the night mode, and knowing when to step away, so I'm not just looking for such a long period of time.
And is your workplace sort of friendly to that need?
It's, you know what, I think if I said I have vision problems at the beginning when I first started my job, I think if I said I have vision problems, it might have been. It's not that there is any frosty reception at all, but I feel very nervous to talk about having a balance problem and having a vestibular disorder, because it's a very I've learned that I'm not like ashamed of it, but plopping that out there, I'm worried, will they think I'm unstable? Will they think I won't be able to turn up to work? Because when my episodes were happening when I was in my early 20s, there's no way I could have held down a job. I barely got through my degree. There's no way I would have been able to go to work. And so I am still I'm getting better, but I am very cautious of dropping the bomb and sharing what I have, because people don't know it. It's not a known problem. It's not a common one, especially being young. I don't know anyone else in my kind of age range who has had any balance problems before. So I'm getting better at sharing that. But yeah, they've been completely, I've never once had an issue where if I say I need to step away from my screen, they're like, no, you need to keep working. It's fine.
You know, nowadays they have lots of tools that you can use on your computer that do different things, like change the contrast. Some of them are overlays that go over, a website, or some websites have contrast. You were talking about the light, and I think contrast is
Yeah.
part of it. A high contrast is difficult to look at, so there are some
Yeah.
websites that will, and this is an issue for people with seizures, for example, that can trigger a seizure, or motion. Some websites have, that will just start, that will launch into some sort of motion that you can't, then you have to turn it off, but by then it's too late. Have you ever used any of those tools?
The one that I use, that I just talking about contrast, I whenever I'm on an application, whether that be my email, my like on any like Word, PowerPoint, if I'm using any type of software, I usually always put it on dark mode. I even have my phone on dark mode. Um, and I don't know whether, I think because it doesn't feel as bright when you do have a bright white screen, you're trying to find your emails, it's just a little bit, it's just too much. Whereas when it is dark and the brightness isn't too high, I think the dark mode feature has really helped me. And so every time I get a new app or anything, I'm like, where's the dark mode? Let me put it on.
Me
And I
too.
think all digital devices are different. Some have, like the iPhone has the parallax effect, that you can turn on or off, which affects motion, because I know that is a big thing. We have Vita has people complaining all the time, if we post something on social media that starts with motion. So we definitely are very aware of that as well. Dr. Cheryl, you were starting to talk about treatments. You mentioned the prism lenses, and then Kimberly was talking about vision therapy. So I'm curious, when a dizzy person comes to you, what treatments or lifestyle adjustments do you suggest if they're being negatively
Um,
impacted by digital screens?
right, which um, they all are. They all are. So I think one of the things is crucial is to figure out their visual status. So, and it has to be extremely precise, right? Because again, they're using their eyes more than anyone else. Um, and humans are using their eyes primarily anyway. So you have to kind of have in that mindset. I tell everybody that um, I live in the little bits, right? So I live in the little things, the little bits, because the little bits can have huge impacts. Um, so very often with the vestibular disorder, you're getting the wrong signals into those eye muscles because you have damage there. And so you get kind of wacky signals going back and forth. So that's kind of our first step, is to analyze what's going on with that. If you're getting those wacky signals, you get these muscles pulling and kind of spasming. And instead of correcting to where they're supposed to correct, they overcorrect. And then humans don't want to see double at all. So then they go like this, and it exacerbates their dizziness because everything's kind of constantly doing this and shaking and spasming. Um, so we analyze that, and then we move those images together. And so another very common symptom with a dizzy patient, when they're on their computer or their screen, they see double way faster than someone else. They don't have to have much of a problem to right away, system's so exhausted, it's just not correcting properly, they see double. So that is our first thing, doing our normal neurovisual medicine exam. Then when I'm correcting that person, I want to know their setup at work. I need to know how many screens, where are the screens, what's the difference, because I need to figure out the physics of that. What is that demand for that person? What is that focusing demand, and what is that demand, that convergence demand? And are they good at doing converging, or do they over converge? And that's one of the problems sometimes we see with someone who was put right into vision therapy and they're busy doing convergence work, and they actually over converge, so their eyes are constantly doing this, and that person's going to get sick from trying to do that. So we analyze all of that. In the normal eye world, when people talk about, oh, I had that patient, they brought me this diagram of their workstation and now I got it and what a pain. I'm like, can you please bring me like measure out for me? I send people back to their offices with like, take a tape measure because I want to know. So that is what's really crucial. And then the next step visually is the different filters that we use. So I just want to kind of educate you on the difference between what I'm wearing right now. This is blue tech. So this is an actual blue wavelengths. When any kind of wavelength of light, you can reflect or you can absorb. This looks yellow because we're absorbing blue wavelengths, and you could actually see the blue reflections because I have like the double on here. So it also reflects off the blue wavelengths. What Cynthia's wearing is Avalux. It's FL41, which is a tint. So FL41 doesn't do anything with the blue wavelengths. Sometimes when I use FL41, I'll put a blue block or anti-glare up on top of it. I'll get even a little bit more softening because I'm affecting different wavelengths of light. The whole migraine glasses and the Avalux came from two small Canadian studies a long time ago, two small studies that they studied this FL41 tint, and people with migraines said they reduced their headache intensity and frequency. So of course, all of these, companies came up with these, proprietary little mixes of this tint, but it's basically FL41. So we use FL41 in tint because we it's a specialty tint that the lab keeps for us, and we use it. I use it a lot with patients. And it's like that rosy kind of tint. And I use different intensities of it, and I have different samples of that we try to see. So that's the difference. So the FL41 or the Axon Avalux, unless you put a blue blocker, it's not really blocking blue wavelengths, which scatter more, right? So we know that blue wavelengths scatter more. So I combine some of those things. Some of it is a little dependent. I always tell everybody, like with the FL41, I got like two small Canadian studies to hang my hat on. So I don't know. Is there anything magical about blocking those wavelengths, or people like it? Whatever, it's a 10. If it works, it works. And we try it out in the office. I have people actually sit right here in front of my computer setup. And I have no adjustments on this because I really want to know. Some people work in an environment they can't have anything adjusted. So I want to see what they feel like. And some people prefer different things. And then, of course, everybody's different, and there's cosmetic things too, right? So maybe they don't want to wear yellow glasses all the time. I find when someone's sensitized, if they have to be working in an environment and they've got the fluorescence and that can't be changed, those scatter also. They actually flicker, and it's picked up your peripheral retina. This works very well. Blue tech.
And
Yep.
I've had just with the fluorescence, I've had people tell me that what they do is they just wear a hat inside.
Yeah.
If
They
they
wear a
have to
hat.
be in an office with
Exactly.
fluorescence
Exactly.
block.
Another thing that we use in our treatment a lot, and I think that also sets us apart from other optometrists or neurooptometrists, we use noise cancellation a lot. So the ears, like they're very connected, and you can get these wacky signals into your eyes and make those images seem to shake or move more just because your ears are being stimulated, and some of those balance organs respond to sound, even though we don't really use that for hearing anymore. So we use different noise cancellation devices. And some people, find that having that on when they're doing their work really, really helps. But it's you have to really analyze for that patient exactly that focal point, where they have to see. When you're holding a phone, it's closer. It's a lot of eye movement. So that's another thing I tell people. I've had people who were doing great. They decided I'm going to read a novel on my phone. And then they call me, I had the worst day of my life. I said, you did 100 times more eye movements just because you're on a little screen, right? That's extremely challenging very unnatural, just not a good thing for anyone to do. And so, to Alexandra's point about taking those breaks, it's super 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 important. And a lot of times, we write letters for patients to say they need to take a break, um, physically,
How,
mentally, visually. It's not good. It's not good.
yeah, that's you don't need all these fancy tools and these glasses. You can just look away from your screen. There you go. And how about natural light? I would imagine that you know is light just light, or is natural light different?
So yeah, so natural light is different because you have different wavelengths in those spectrums, right? So it's different. And natural light is still better. However, some people, just being outside on a super sunny day, that really bothers them. And that's another thing that you have to be careful with, because some people are so sensitized by light, they're wearing super dark sunglasses even indoors all the time, and that's not good for your visual system. You'll dark adapt yourself and you'll never get back into it. So that's a process that, people come to us and we have to slowly take down those tints because they've been wearing, a full-on sunglass inside. But natural light is of course always better. But I don't know. I guess I'm a realist. Also, I'm a realist at heart, and I try to understand what that person has to do. And my whole goal and focus and is I've got a human in front of me that needs to function. And I'm all about how do I get that person to function up to their best ability for what they have to do in the shortest amount of time. Like, how do I do that for that person? And I tell a lot of people, I had a woman the other day, she had bilateral vestibular hypofunction. Bilateral, both ears. She's had this for a while. I can't fix that, right? I can't fix that. No one can fix that, but I can make this the best as possible. And can make a huge difference to someone, a huge difference from non-functional, struggling in their day-to-day life to doing their job, performing, enjoying their life. And I think that's huge. And so you really have to think of, I think of every patient that way. Every patient
It
that way.
reminds me of just basic stress management. It's not one tool, it's many tools. And so it's the same with our eyes and our ears. Each one of those little things just diminishes the stress level a little bit.
Right.
And, then we pile them all on top of each other and it might just be enough to
Correct.
prevent an attack.
Exactly. It's reducing those triggers, making everything as easy as possible. And I think one of the problems in our system is everybody looks at in the medical system, everybody looks at their body part exclusively, but humans don't work that way. We don't work that way. It's all together. And the more I learn, the more I'm fascinated that anybody works, right? So that's how complicated it is. So everybody looks at their one part and then they say to the person, well, that looks fine to me. So, especially if you're a woman, oh, it must be anxiety, right? That's got to be anxiety. There's nothing wrong with this anxiety. And because they're not thinking this is a whole person, right?
Alexandra, what is your um, so looking at the whole person, like Dr. Cheryl was just talking about, you started running. And of course, we're talking about screens here, but I feel like this is really important because you've developed an activity, and I imagine it takes quite a bit of time in your days where you're suddenly not looking at a screen anymore. Was that one of your decisions here, or did that sort of catalyze your decision to start running? And also, I want to know how natural light works with you as well.
Yeah, natural light, again, it's almost, I need to wear my sunglasses and I need to have a hat on. And also just being ginger, I've been conditioned that way. You don't go out if it's sunny, you don't go out without your glasses and your hat. I When I was really, really ill and my episodes were really bad, I can just remember thinking, you know what, I don't care if being young and self-conscious about how I look, I don't care if I balloon up, shrink, I just want to be able to walk. I just want to, like, I can't do anything anymore. This is going to be my life now. I had dreams. I wanted to live abroad. I wanted to, and suddenly it's, oh no, you can't do any of that. You're at home. You might make it to the couch downstairs instead of your bed. That was my goal for the day. And so I remember thinking, like, so help me God, if I ever get better, I want to do something that I never would have thought I would be able to do. And running, I used to not be able to run a mere 10 seconds. I'd be like, well, I've undiagnosed asthma. I can't even move. Like, I'm not a runner. I was always a sport supporter, not the sport activist. Like, I could never do it. And I think because when you're running, your head's straight. If I get to a crossroads and there's traffic lights, not even just running, but in my life, I always go very slowly looking left and right, because if I swing my head too quick, I feel like I'm suddenly in like a roar. It's like a vortex almost in my head, and it'll knock me out for the rest of the day. So I'm very conscious about moving slowly, but also not constricting my movement, because then I get really stiff in my head and my neck. So I've learned to be very, especially if I'm driving, if I'm doing anything, I need to just take it slowly if I'm looking either side. But I think the fact that when you're running, it's just you and your thoughts, and you're running straight, your head is straight. And I think that's why it's been such a manageable thing for me to learn how to do, because I've tried other things. I still can't. I tried a golf swing a couple months ago. Forget it. I couldn't. It's the swinging motion of my head. Mm-hmm. Tennis, again, it's just, anything that has any head tilting or head movement is still a no-go for me. And I don't think I will want to do that, because I'm so worried about it triggering an episode. To me now, that's not worth it. I'd rather do what I know I can do, and keeping my head straight and just running forward. I think that's why I've been able to do it, obviously with sunglasses and a hat on if it's sunny out.
Yeah, and I think for people who, I get that, just going straight. For people who can't run, walking, I think also serves that need. And I was just thinking that for me, what my recreation is, my exercise is hiking. And that's the time when I'm not looking at a screen, for a whole day. I'm not looking at a screen. And I imagine that must really help my system to reset,
I sometimes don't even I used to run with headphones in. I'd have a podcast at the go, or I'd have music. And that I didn't realize was really triggering. And I couldn't work out why it was triggering, because it's just music. Oh, I'm just, I'm distracting myself. I don't want to run. I'll get bored. I need I need music to motivate me. But actually now I enjoy running without any headphones, even early in the morning or late at night, when there isn't sirens, there aren't honkings, there aren't anything, it's just as quiet as possible. That's now my optimal stage.
Right. And what occurs to me is we're talking about visual issues and vestibular issues. So we're not just talking about people who have visual issues, and we're not just talking about people who have vestibular issues. We're talking about people who have both. So Dr. Cheryl, my question to you is,
it's all entwined. Yeah.
Entwined. Yeah. And they one can exacerbate the other. So totally. Dr. Cheryl, when you have someone who is experiencing dizziness, how do you work with them to help them find the root cause of their dizziness when that's not, you're dealing with the visual issues? How do you help them deal with the vestibular issues?
Right. So that's another aspect of how I was trained. I was trained to be a dizzy sorter, right? So the first thing is the history, listening to that patient. When we have an initial evaluation, I have a 2-hour block of time for that person. So, and a huge amount of that time is for me hearing their story. And I say to them, tell me your dizzy story. Almost every single person says, it's a long story. I say, I know. I want to know the day it started, what you were doing when it started. From that, listening to thousands of stories, you start thinking along a path. Did they have an acute vestibular neuritis? Did they have BPPV? Was that diagnosed? Were they diagnosed 40 years ago with Meniere's, but maybe it's not really Meniere's because everybody had Meniere's 40 years ago. What was their testing? What's their sound sensitivity like? Certain questions. Do they possibly have a third mobile window defect that was missed? Because that is super, super common. From there, do they have dysautonomia or POTS? And that's the problem. And so we'll do blood pressures, lying down, sitting, standing, and they're dizzy because that's the problem. Are they dizzy? I had one patient. He was so lightheaded, dizzy. I saw his list of medications. And he had some psychiatric problems, and he went from one psychiatrist to another to another. Nobody weaned him off anything. They just kept adding and adding and adding. No wonder nothing is working right. So the history or figuring out is super important. Are they dizzy? Do they have oscillopsia because they have nystagmus? And what is that nystagmus from? Is it a vestibular disorder? I had one guy once that boom, 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 vertical. And they're like, they don't know why. They don't know why. He's so dizzy from it. Of course, they didn't know why. I said, did you have an MRI? Yes, I did. They didn't find anything. I say, you go back and have another MRI. Look at the brainstem. He had a little stroke in his brainstem. So vertical nystagmus is going to make somebody feel really dizzy. Nystagmus is that abnormal eye movements, right? That shaking up and down. And with someone like that, we try to find what's called a null point, so we can move the images where it slows down a little bit. Also, that's one of the more challenging things because sometimes I can't do anything to help that person, but at least I can point someone in the right direction. So I also have resources, and at least in my area now, we get patients from all over the place, even outside of the country. So I don't always have Vita is a huge help when someone comes from somewhere else to find someone who really is a qualified vestibular therapist. Around here, I know people. There are a couple of really, really, really fine neuro-otologists who are really interested in the dizzy patient in the country, and that will actually do records reviews for people. And so we get that person in touch with them. And sometimes it's just kind of starting to think about that diagnosis because someone will say, well, I've been tested. I've been this, I've been that. And I said, no, you haven't. You haven't. You haven't had every test. And then I always couch everything to say, just because nothing showed up on a test doesn't mean there isn't a problem. It means we don't have the test yet to find the problem.
And when there's so many tests, that can be overwhelming as well.
Yeah.
Just sorry to interrupt. I don't even know the names of all the different tests I had. I remember a tilt table test.
That's for POTS.
Having water spun in my ear.
That's a
any test under the sun.
Yeah.
And that became so depressing and debilitating, just going for another test and nothing. Right. You don't have this. So what do I have?
Right, exactly. That is what
the beginning of my journey. That
exactly
really got me down in the dumps.
Yeah.
Not knowing what tests I needed to do, and so there are so many tests, and we have made so many steps forward, but it's not a very well researched field. So there aren't tests that will say you have even what I have. There isn't a test to say you have what I have. It's from talking to my doctor, and he realized what I have.
Right. That's a diagnosis of exclusion. So they have to. That's why they have to do all those tests. They're excluding and saying this. It's not this. It's not this. It's not this. So
it can be such a helpless experience. And Alexandra, I know what you're saying, and I lived that myself. And I think having someone like you, Dr. Cheryl, would have been such a somebody to sit down and say, what does day one look like? Like, how did this start? And to really have that map inside and understanding. I don't feel like you're kind of one in 10 perhaps practitioners in the country that can do that. And women, and then in Alexandra's case, it sounds like you got lucky. Eventually, you found that physician, but there was a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, there was a lot of back and forth, and because no one in my family had ever had anything like this.
Yeah.
I remember one day, I'm on the couch, I'm non-stop throwing up. I don't even feel nauseous, and it's all day long. And my parents are looking at me thinking, oh my, does she have brain cancer? Like, is this something so deadly that we didn't see coming? Because they had no idea. Once I found my doctor and I found my medication, I learned to live with it. But when the symptoms can be so violent,
Yeah.
it's like a rabbit hole of, oh my god, what does she have? So yeah, lots of tests, very 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 disheartening, but there is hope at the end of there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And it's just, I wish I could go back to my 21-year-old self now and say, like, not only did you manage to move back here alone, you aren't, you don't live on the couch anymore, you have a job. I just remember thinking, okay, well, my life's done. I'm all my goals and dreams gone. Like, so
Yeah.
You're an inspiration, and you should really,
Yeah.
keep telling your story for people. And one of the things I want to applaud you for is the running. I'm a big exerciser, and that's another thing I talk to all my patients about. Not only when you find whatever you like, that you enjoy, that you can tolerate, that you really love to do. I think part of the other benefit to it is the natural happy hormones that get released in your brain because you like doing it. And I think that is so healing for everybody on so many levels. I think what I always tell people, again, one of the ways I think about a dizzy patient, and so many of them are so anxious, right? And I'm saying, you don't feel right. You don't feel safe in your environment. So
yeah,
your body's releasing these stress hormones. So
totally.
the dizziness, this problem is causing your anxiety. The anxiety wasn't causing your problems. It's the other way around. You
Yeah,
don't feel safe in your environment. And
yeah.
whatever we can do to work to get someone out of that fight or flight mode is so
Yeah.
helpful. And that exercising, when it's something that that person likes, is just huge. It's got more benefits than just your cardiovascular health and it really really helps. And you think you're just looking straight ahead, but believe it or not, you're running, you are scanning your environment. You are.
Yeah.
So you are doing that. So you are using that vestibular ocular reflex, and you're really using it because as you go up and down, right? That's part of that reflex too, right? Your head's going up and down, your eyes go in the opposite direction. So you don't even know you're doing it, but you are. And so that's just kind of more, that's therapy. And
Yeah.
people who learn to get out there and move their body in that space do much better. And I think that's another problem, because when you're sitting on the screen, you're just sitting. Again, it's
Exactly.
not
And when you
good
can't
for
do
humans.
it,
Yep.
yeah, when you're, at the beginning of when I started the vestibular therapy, and
Yeah.
it was like, okay, you're
Yeah.
going to sit in this chair, then you're going to stand, then
Yeah.
you'll sit,
Yes.
and then you'll stand. I thought, really? Is
Yeah.
this now what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I was a healthy woman. I was a healthy
Healthy. Yeah.
child, healthy completely.
Yeah.
And then doing that physical therapy, I thought, am I just going to be learning how to sit and stand? Is that my goal for this week? Just learning how to, but it's a
Yeah.
therapy. And
You do
once
now.
you, I think, go over the big hill and you learn what works for you and what triggers you, and if you are lucky enough to be able to be physical and move, I think that's the goal that I think myself and probably a lot of other vestibular patients would want as a goal, even if they still have symptoms and still have bad days, because the bad days are like depressing bad days. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you think you will be dizzy forever, So having a physical active goal has been, I think, the best thing that's come out of me. Even though I wouldn't want to change anything, but I'm actually now okay with the fact that I went through all that. Now that I have this physical thing that I enjoy.
What's marathon will you be doing this year so we can all root for you?
I'm actually going to set up the fundraising page today. It's the Toronto one. It's on May 5th.
Wow.
I'm terrified. I actually did do a 30-kilometer run this morning. That was the furthest I've ever run in my life. I can't feel my feet. So it's, you know what, I don't need a time in mind. I want to go and enjoy the day and enjoy crossing the finish line. That will be, if I can do that, and I know I've put in a lot of hard work and training, and especially also in Toronto when it's snowing and you open your door and I'm almost snowed in. It's like, oh great, I've got 8K to do tonight. Okay,
Yeah, this is so awesome.
That's therapy as well.
You have thousands of vestibular patients rooting you on.
Thank you.
That's
I enjoy having them on my back.
one of the things I love about this podcast is that we get to talk to people when they have been through their journey and can look back on, the difficult times and appreciate where they were. And we can also send that message that it will get better, that there is hope. So I hope anyone listening out there who is having a difficult day today can feel the hope and know that with good care, a full good team of vestibular specialists. It's not just one doctor. You need a whole team, a multidisciplinary team of vestibular specialists, and the support of people like you who are also struggling with this through the Vita community, that things will get better. So thank you both for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your expertise, Dr. Cheryl. And thank you all for joining us today.
What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thanks for tuning in to ICU this month.
We hope this conversation sparked new understanding of the vestibular journey. And for all of our patients out there, leaves you feeling just a little more heard and a little more seen. I see you.